When it comes to lost media, it can come in any form from any time, whether it's some video game from the 2000s, a movie from the 90s, a recording of a real-life incident from the 1800s, and it can even be some literature from 400 BC. If it's something that's archived and unavailable to the public, then it's considered lost media. However, when I say it can come in any form from any time, it can also include media too disturbing to most people. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at some lost media that probably should stay lost for its disturbing nature. The Tonight Show with Jay Leno was a television talk show that aired from 1992 until 2009 when it was replaced with The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien, but returned in 2010, replacing The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien until it was replaced again in 2014 with The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, and is still ongoing to this day. Between 2000 and 2001, California experienced multiple large-scale blackouts due to shortage of electricity supply. On June 21, 2001, Leno decided in response to the California power outages, he would film an episode entirely in the dark with candles and flashlights and called it Unplugged. Halfway through the episode, Leno brought out a special guest, Arsenio Hall, a comedian, actor, and also a talk show host with his own talk show called The Arsenio Hall Show. Hall was going to perform a popular magic trick where a person, mostly a female assistant, is cut in half or into more pieces. However, as Hall began cutting the woman, she began screaming at the top of her lungs, saying she was cut, with Hall immediately stopping to help the woman, and Hall could be heard saying,
"Uh-oh, get Johnny Cochran on the phone, somebody."
Before cutting to commercial. For those who don't know, Johnny Cochran was an attorney who helps represent celebrities like P. Diddy, Michael Jackson, Tupac Shakur, Stanley Tookie Williams, who co-founded the Crips gang, Snoop Dogg, and most notably O.J. Simpson. Because of this comment Hall made, most people dismissed this incident as a joke or a bit Leno planned, but even if this was a joke, it was pretty dark, especially for TV, which most likely explains why this episode was never re-aired by NBC after September 3rd and became lost media. On September 23rd, 2024, Internet Archive user Oakley Tapes would upload the entire episode along with other Jay Leno episodes, but this would go unnoticed until February 24th of this year when General Alto would re-upload the episode onto the YouTube channel. Wheel of Fortune is one of the most widely known and loved game shows, created by Merv Griffin all the way back in 1975 and is still going to this day. The game show has approximately 8,000 episodes, but one of these would become infamous for catching a playoff. The question was 30-year-old Matthew Fenwick, who prior to appearing on the show, was on the run from police for allegedly selling two young girls, 8 and 10. The episode Fenwick appeared in was on March 18, 1998, but the tape predates by a month, on February 13th. There's nothing to know about the episode itself, but as soon as it aired on television, one of the girls he recognized him, told her mother, and the mother notified police, and 2 days after the episode aired, Fenwick was finally arrested and charged with 2 felony counts of aggravated indecent liberties with a child. Fenwick pleaded guilty to all the charges and was sentenced to 6 years with a $50,000 bond. The episode itself became lost media for over 20 years until October 2nd, 2020, when a user of the Buy a Vowel Boards forum, WheelFan82, posted the episode in its entirety and is viewable for everyone. On March 13, 2007, a sequel to the first God of War game would be released simply called God of War 2, but before the release, Sony held an event and promotion for the game in Greece on March 1st. Sony invited around 20 journalists to the event, and apparently it included throwing knives at targets, pulling a live snake from a pit with bare hands, topless women feeding the guests with grapes, and most infamously, reaching into the guts of a slaughtered goat and eating what's inside of there, which was supposedly just Greek soup. Not only was this event extremely out of pocket, but Sony planned to include photographs taken from this event, including the slaughtered goat, and put it in their magazine. However, subscribers received the issue before its release and immediately shared its graphic nature, getting the attention of animal rights activists and critics of video game violence. In response, Sony apologized for this and recalled around 80,000 copies of the magazine, but 2,000 copies already reached subscribers by the time Sony did the recall. The magazine would be released again, but without the goat images in it, and the 2,000 copies would become an extremely rare collector's item. However, no scans of this rare article would ever be released, including the uncensored image of the butchered goat, and some pictures taken at the event would go unused. Event Horizon is a 1997 horror science movie about a crew of astronauts in the year 2047 sent on a rescue mission to find a missing spaceship called Event Horizon. However, they discover that the crew of the spaceship died and something sinister lurks there. The movie was a box office failure upon release, grossing $42 million with their $60 million budget. But despite this, the movie managed to garner a cult following and was referenced in popular culture like Interstellar, Star Trek Nemesis, Blade, and even in video games like Dino Crisis 3, Fear, First Counter-Assault Recon, Overwatch, and Dead Space being the inspiration for the game. However, the director of the movie, Paul Anderson, revealed that the final released 96-minute movie had a lot of deleted scenes, coming to at least 130 minutes. Apparently, when Anderson showed the full film to a test audience, the scenes were so gruesome and violent, it caused some of them to get sick and faint, leading to the deletion of the scenes. The following deleted scenes are extended version of Peter's hallucinating her son with wounds on his legs covered in maggots, the scene of Ware's wife, Claire's Zeus was more graphic and bloodier, the scene of Captain Miller discovering DJ's corpse was longer, with quote, vivisected body with his intestines on the table, and the infamous blood orgy scene. The scene is too graphic to go in depth, but the scene included Issei. Crew members were being cut to pieces, and the director of the scene, Vadim Jean, even hired grown-up actors and real-life amputees to make it more realistic and graphic. After the movie did very well on DVD release, Paramount and fans asked Anderson for a director's cut for the movie, including the deleted scenes. However, the footage wasn't archived properly and was damaged by the time it was found. In an interview from 2012, Anderson revealed that producer Lloyd Levin found the original cut of the movie on a VHS. However, the two never got around to watching it since then. Despite an attempt made in 2021 by Scream Factory to restore the original cut, they were unsuccessful, and it seems extremely unlikely now that we'll ever get to see what the gruesome and graphic scenes were. Terence Delaney was a 59-year-old businessman who owned around 4 video shops in Wallasey, a town in England. He was described as a good-natured man according to his neighbors and lived a single and quiet life. However, it was believed by police that Delaney purposely set up a video club to take advantage of young boys. Delaney would lure boys back to his flat, offer them weed, and would fear them. Among his victims were 20-year-olds John Jason Quilty and Paul Simon Kinworthy. The two already had previous interactions with Delaney and were both victims of him, but despite this, the two planned to meet up with him together to smoke weed on November 17, 1997. Kinworthy decided that due to what he experienced from Delaney's heinous acts on him, he would bring a kitchen knife with him for protection. Unfortunately, like last time, Delaney made sexual advances on the two again, but this time, Kinworthy brandished his knife in response and stabbed Delaney 57 times. Quilty witnessed the entire murder and helped assist Kinworthy in cleaning the crime scene because he was, quote, frightened. Around 12 to 24 hours after Delaney was murdered, a female friend of his entered his flat and discovered the corpse. After a massive manhunt, the two were eventually arrested and at first pleaded not guilty, but Kinworthy would plead guilty on October 18, 1998, while Quilty remained on his not guilty plea. However, during prosecution, Kinworthy and Quilty would come to the realization that Delaney had secret cameras hidden in the flat, and one of them was recording the entire murder, including Delaney's last words being, quote, I'm dying, and the pair attempting to clean the crime scene. The recording was used as evidence in court, along with much other evidence, and the two were found guilty and sentenced to life. Due to how obscure this case is and the disturbing nature of the video, it's extremely unlikely it'll ever be released to the public, but I think it's fair to say Delaney got what he deserved, and hopefully Kinworthy and Quilty are doing well. Maggie De La Riva is a Filipina actress who appeared in movies, TV shows, radio broadcasts, was a singer, and even had her own show called Maggie on ABS3. She got her first big break in a movie called Istanbul in 1963 thanks to Joseph Estrada, a popular actor at the time who also appeared in the movie. She would since then have big breaks here and there, and all would be going well until in 1967 she would be kidnapped by 4 men, taken to a hotel, and would be abused and The 4 men in question were 21-year-old Jamie Jose, an engineering student from De La Salle College, Edgardo Aquino, a second-year journalism student and son of a lawyer, Basilia Pineda Jr., the son of a retired police chief and was a member of multiple gangs that assaulted celebrities, and Rogelio Sevilla Canal, an architecture student and son of a former principal. On the night of June 26, 1967, Rogelio Canal and Edgardo Aquino visited the residence of Jamie Jose to borrow his red Pontiac, and and while at first refused, obliged to give them his first car in exchange that he would tag along. The three then headed to a nightclub where they would meet Basilio Pineda Jr., who would confess his love for De La Riva and reveal to the three that he knew where her taping session would be. The four men then drove to the venue where De La Riva just finished a recording at around 4:30 a.m. After finishing her session, De La Riva and her assistant drove to their home, with the men tailing them. As De La Riva was arriving home, the men blasted their horn, causing De La Riva to accelerate to avoid collision, which eventually caused De La Riva to hit a post near a residence. The men then began flashing their headlights, blinding De La Riva. One of the occupants got out of the car, grabbed De La Riva's arm, and dragged her to the Pontiac, all while her assistant attempted to grab De La Riva, but was unsuccessful. After kidnapping Maggie De La Riva, they take her to a rundown motel while they would do disgusting acts towards her. After a while, the men eventually flagged down a cab, warned De La Riva that if she went to the police, they would hunt her down and melt her face with acid and send her home. When she got home, she immediately filed a rape case, and not long after, all four men were arrested, and on October 2nd, 1967, were sentenced to death by electricity chair. On December 28, 1970, 2 years before the executions were planned to happen, Rogelia Canal committed suicide from a drug overdose. Coward. President Ferdinand Marcos at the time ordered the executions to be broadcasted, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. However, sources are mixed on whether this was broadcasted on radio stations or was broadcasted on television. Either way, no footage or audio from this execution have been publicly released, and it's extremely unlikely we'll ever see anything from it. David Parker Ray was an American serial killer who was suspected to have killed up to 60 women between 1957 up to his arrest in 1999 when one of his victims escaped. What this monster did is too disturbing to be talked about on YouTube, but what you should know is that Ray had a semi-trailer with soundproofing and called it his toy box, kidnapped women, and for months would do awful things to them. Ray would then drug his victims with barbiturates in an attempt to erase their memories before abandoning them on the side of a road. On July 23, 1993, Ray recorded a tape where he would go into detail on what he was going to do to his victims, including other things like how he didn't like to kill but had to when it was quote absolutely necessary and would dump them in a canyon somewhere to rot. There's more to the audio tape, but to be honest with you, I don't want to talk about them, and I think you get the gist of it. The transcript of the audio tape was released to the public, but the audio itself was never released, and it stayed that way for a long time until October 6, 2022, when Lost Media Wiki user Tom Servo sent a request to the New Mexico Department of Public Safety for a digitized copy of the tape, and after 15 days was sent the 5-minute MP3 file of the tape and has since uploaded to the Internet Archive and YouTube for anybody to listen to. On June 11, 1981, 32-year-old Issei Sagawa invited his classmate, 25-year-old Renee Hardeville, over to his apartment to help translate poetry for a school assignment. However, Sagawa actually planned on killing her and eating her, saying he, quote, selected her for her health, beauty, and characteristics he lacked. As Hardeville was reading poetry at a desk, Sagawa came up from behind and shot her in the neck with a rifle. Sagawa would then do unspeakable acts to her corpse, and after purchasing a butcher knife just for this occasion, began chopping off her body parts and eating them, all while photographing the horrendous act. Once the body parts he didn't eat started decomposing, Sagawa put the remains in 2 suitcases and attempted to dump them in a lake, but was caught in the act and arrested by police. The most frustrating part about this case was the fact that Sagawa was found legally insane and was held in a mental institution, even though he was later found to be completely sane, and when he was deported to Japan, charges against Sagawa dropped in France where the murder occurred, and the French court documents were never released to Japan authorities, so Sagawa was able to walk free with no justice served. Not only did the justice system fail, for some reason, Sagawa became somewhat of a celebrity in Japan for the cannibalism. Issei Sagawa would eventually die on November 24, 2022 at the age of 73 from complications of pneumonia. The last media in question here is the photographs Sagawa took, taking pictures for each eating stage, but thankfully they were never released to the public, and it's even speculated that Sagawa recorded the entire incident from committing the murder to eating Hardeville, but I couldn't find any information on this, so take it with a grain of salt.